Hey all, welcome back to the channel, and today, in the interest of fairness, I thought it was only right that I take a few minutes to talk about VR Troopers? Nah, it's Void Rivals. It's the second printing of the first issue that managed to come into my possession. I've never been a huge fan of Transformers in comics, but this is what's going to kick off the Skybound Image Energon universe. That will be an overlap of Transformers and G.I. Joe, and maybe a couple of other characters, factions. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about this in the latest GotBot True review. Hey all, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, your most humble of hosts, Dennis Moulton, aka GotBot. As always, please like, comment, share, of course subscribe, and while you are at it, light 'em up, baby! Hit that notification bell, please. It helps me out a ton, and it lets you know when content of all sorts goes up here on the channel. Check out Machinery of Man, The Everything Factor, all the groups that I'm either a mod or an admin for, as well as all of my social media links. All of that is in the description down below, also in the description down below, and if you're in a position to help the channel to grow, you can use the donate link. Check us out on Patreon, see what we have to offer to you through Spring, or of course hit the join button at any given time and become a channel member. And this is issue 1 of Void Rivals, and I've never been a huge fan of Transformers in comics. I guess because I want to see them transform, and that's a very visual thing, I've never really been drawn to them in comic book fiction. I've respected and read and owned some of the original Marvel run, though it was never my main thing because they didn't look like the things on the cartoon, right? Like Optimus looked different and whatnot. And it was an aesthetic that didn't necessarily land with me. I kind of was out of the fandom somewhat, certainly on the fringe during like the Dreamwave run back in the day. And to be quite honest, those are the years like that I was in university and whatnot. I mean, it is what it is. I didn't at all care for the treatment of them in IDW at all from beginning to end. I tried to jump in multiple times. I found it poorly edited. I found it generally unreadable. I found the ideas and plot lines terrible. It wasn't at all for me. I get that there's a certain cult following to it, and it's not just Transformers. I've tried to read a few other franchises from them, and it's not a company that I enjoy. I don't like how they handle stuff, and I don't know if it's the writing or the editing or what. It's not a company for me. So, with Transformers, and G.I. Joe for that matter, changing now to go with Skybound and Image, I said, you know what, I'll give it a chance. I'll give it a go because I gotta be fair. That's the only way that I can assess anything, right? Is if I'm fair and give it a chance. So without any further ado, we're gonna kind of head out of here. Not so much over to the table, but we are gonna talk about this, the good and the bad, now. So in the interest of fairness, it's only right that I give my thoughts after reading the first issue of Void Rivals, which kicks off the Energon universe for the Skybound Image version of Transformers and G.I. Joe, a crossover universe that will include many things. Void Rivals was created by Robert Kirkman and Lorenzo De Felici. I hope I'm saying his name right. Felici? Maybe. Issue 1 was edited by Bixie Matthew. So this is the start of this entire new universe. Kirkman is very excited about this, claims that he is a longtime Transformers and G.I. Joe fan. He's the same age as me, born in 1978, which does put him in a golden age for these franchises, no doubt about it. He claims that witnessing Optimus Prime's death in the 86 movie is one of the things that led him to the method of storytelling that he uses now that builds to some sort of an unexpected moment. He is thrilled to see the Zertonians and the Agorians mentioned alongside the Cybertronians and the Quintessons, and claims that seamlessly Duke, Scarlet, Cobra Commander, and Destro will all end up fitting into this universe easily. He also claims that we will see more familiar faces as the months and years unfold. Characters will be introduced slowly over time. He also says that his office is giving him a lot of inspiration because he has surrounded himself with Transformers and G.I. Joe merchandise. You know what? If you're going to do the fiction, it's a great idea to throw yourself into it. So, I have to give credit where credit is due. He is immersing himself. That's a good start. Now, what about the actual story of Void Rivals itself? The story opens on a crash landing of a spaceship and an unconscious pilot, and the only thing that's talking is his mechanical red glove, which we later learn is named Handroid. Kind of a cool name if you ask me. The glove basically takes the pilot's unconscious body to the medkit that is, some feet away, and we end up learning that the unconscious pilot who is revived is an Agorian named Darak. We learned that his ship crashed because he was battling a Zartonian ship and ended up getting caught in the gravitational pull of a comet that slingshot him into a quadrant that is an unknown quadrant very far away from the familiar Sacred Ring, whatever the Sacred Ring is. We don't know that at this point either. Solila, the Zartonian, is also on the planetoid, and quickly the two begin to engage in combat, but that stops almost as fast as it starts when they realize that in order to survive, they're actually going to have to put their differences aside and learn to cooperate together. Maybe taking parts from both of their ships would allow them to have one ship that could work to get them off of this planetoid. Their hate is largely based on misinformation, mistrust, and propaganda that keeps them from even interacting with each other in the most minimal of ways. Agorians, in fact, should not so much as hear Zartonian voices. That's how strict their, code of honor is. So Lilia, as they're working on their ships, ends up accidentally blowing up her ship. And she kind of almost very quickly, it's almost odd how quickly she gives up and says, oh, we're going to die, and she goes off on her own because there's no point in us working together. Darak, in the meantime, refuses to quit and learns through Handroid that still 58% of the ship that just blew up is salvageable. In the meantime, Solila finds another crashed ship who turns out to be none other than the Transformer Jetfire. We don't know why he's crashed or how he got here either. They do an energy transfer, and Jetfire wakes up and transforms. Kind of confused as to where he is and why there's weathering on his body. He soon wonders, where is Cybertron and what has happened to Cybertronians? And he ends up, saying, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm a scientist. And he transforms and he takes off, leaving the two humanoids behind. They start to ponder their situation once again and decide maybe we could come up with some sort of mechanical armor or suit or backpack or something that would allow us to also leave this planetoid, even if we can't use the ships. They will need to work together. They will need to build trust. They even go so far as removing their helmets, something that would certainly not be allowed, as you should not lay eyes on the other. And when they remove their helmet, they learn that they're the same, just like Darak's vision, whatever his vision was. And that is the cliffhanger that we are left with at the end of issue 1. Let's start with a couple of criticisms first, and honestly, they're fairly minimal at this point. I'm going to give the criticisms for the writing and for the art. In terms of the writing, sometimes some of the wording seems a little either juvenile or a little too simplistic. I assume it's a plot device given the fact that an issue of a comic book usually runs about 20 pages or so you have limited space and limited panels. I would like to think that as time goes on and we learn more about these characters and they grow and expand, that the writing as well as the dialogue will become a little more natural. I mean, it's no different than the beginning of any, for example, TV show, where things seem a little stiff to start, but the potential is there. Then we have the artwork. I like the artwork for the most part, and we'll get to that in a minute, but if I was to point out one thing, it would be the faces of the humanoids after they take off their masks. They're fine, and it's all there, but something seems slightly perplexing about it to me. It might be around the eyes and the eyebrow area. Now, I don't know if these species are supposed to exactly look like humans or just similar to. I guess time will tell. I would like to see a little bit more
to a little bit more, I don't want to say detail to the face, but I'd like to see around the eyes maybe handled ever so slightly different. I would even say that the face of the one Cybertronian we have here, Jetfire, is a little bit off as well. I think the nose should be slightly a different shape. The jawline is a little too long, and the eyes seem to be big. But I've noted that with all of the teaser images we've had, especially for the Decepticons in particular, their eyes seem a little bit big to me. But that too may change as time goes on. We'll see. Otherwise, I don't think I really have any criticisms this early on. So let's get to what's positive about this start, this Energon universe. So if we're going to talk about the positives now of the writing and this universe, everything is sort of connected together. So in terms of just this story in and of itself, I like that it starts out with what seems to be a pretty hopeless situation in one character. It can only build from there. And right away, we learn that the only other character is a rival. It seems like these two rivals are going to be trapped on the planet, and I like that, we kind of get an idea of let's put pieces of both ships together. One of the ships blows up. Okay, it's a hopeless situation again. And by the end, we even have an idea that maybe, just maybe, we could build some sort of suits or something that can get us off of the planet. There's 2 or 3 times that the situation seems hopeless. Not going to lie, thought Jetfire might have taken them off planet, but he's too, I guess, focused on getting home to Cybertron. I can't blame the guy. But it's hopelessness against hopelessness. We also learn of the embittered history between both the Zertonians and the Agorians. I hope I'm saying those words right again. Though we don't know the backstory so much of why they detest each other, we do know that there's a lot of propaganda and mistrust that's based on a lot of misinformation. And I wondered as we went through if maybe, just maybe, they're actually 2 sides of the same coin. The same species divided in half. I'm even wondering now if one species is all male and the other is all female. Although the crystals in their head do seem to be a little bit different. So I like that we're left with a lot of open-endedness. And I like that the story that was presented is a very simple, straightforward story that went from event to event to event. Hopeless event to a hopeless event to hopeless event to leave us with a bit of a cliffhanger. I just wish that if we think of each of the events as like a wire pole, I wish the wires connecting it, being the dialogue, was just a little bit more succinct and concise. And again, I think that will come in time as we and the writers learn who the characters are and flesh them out even more. So I do see some hope to the writing. It needs to stay the course with straightforward stories to build this universe yet. We'll see how that pans out. But I do have some hope for what could be an engaging overlap. The only other thing I would mention at this point is where it's going to be a shared universe, that may be a lot to manage, especially where you are now introducing characters that fans of Transformers and G.I. Joe may not be familiar with. You're going to have to give them a full background. And will you do that for the Zertonians and the Agorians? We'll see as time goes on. Now let's talk about briefly the positives of the artwork. I love the line detailing as well as the background detailing. The colors are kind of clear. They don't bleed too much into each other, which I like, though they do kind of bleed into each other when it's appropriate. For example, the ground, right? Because that's not all going to be necessarily the one color, but it's not overdone and it's not overpowering. The clothing that the main characters wear, and I suppose Jetfire, seems to have bright, bold colors that are different from the background and the dark night sky, or the space sky where this is a planetoid. Here's the thing. We have a fully fleshed out background. We have fully fleshed out characters, but neither overwhelms the other. You don't struggle to see all the detail, and you don't struggle to see how and why the characters are moving the way they do. It all comes across very visually logical. That said, I do think the humanoid faces, and even the Cybertronian face, needs a little bit of work as well. After all, faces are such an identifying feature that we'll have to see exactly how they handled the G.I. Joe characters. I'm very curious as to what Duke, Destro, Scarlet, and Cobra Commander will look like in comparison to Darak and Solila. I have no idea if I'm saying their names right. Again, I think the potential is there for some interesting artwork, but I hope that the faces that are supposed to actually be human have a little bit of a stylistic difference from these alien ones. I don't know if I want them to look exactly human. I'd like for them to look a little bit alien, maybe around the eyes, right? Time, again, will tell, but visually, looking at this, it was very clear, it was very concise, it was very much a nice visual story. I appreciate it. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt rewarded, both in terms of the wording and the lettering. The lettering was generally done quite well and quite clear as well as the artwork. There's a lot that could go wrong here yet, but there's also a lot that could go right here yet. Let's see how this Energon universe unfolds, but I do think that Void Rivals, while I would have liked to have seen more Transformers in it, I do think that Void Rivals at least starts off by setting a nice buffet table for us all to explore.
And here we are once again, and here this is. So it's an okay comic book, but really the story that starts to unfold herein is, I'm going to assume, the conflict between the the other two species, the Zertonians and the Agorians, I think they're called, Darak and Solila. I have no idea if I'm saying those names right. There's a lot of unanswered questions, however, in this story. Where are they? Are they in a void, or are they just in regular space? Why is his ship crashed on the planet? Why would her ship be crashed on the planet? Why do these two species, races, whatever, seem to hate each other when they're the same? Why is Jetfire, and he goes by the name Jetfire here, why is he, seemingly out of energy, crash landed, unconscious for a long time? We don't know where Cybertron is or kind of what's going on there. And though he's on the cover, it's just a very little nod to Transformers in here. No mention at all of G.I. Joe. However, on that last page where Kirkman kind of, lays out his thoughts about this, I must say, he seems very enthusiastic, or certainly comes across as very enthusiastic and as a fan. And he does seem to say that characters and things like G.I. Joe will seamlessly incorporate and transition. Time will tell if that happens. I think it was a somewhat simplistic story, but a straightforward story that opened the door to this universe. Some of the writing is a little stilted, some of it's a little bit cheesy, but I assume that that's done because of, limited space that you have to fit the story in, and narrative devices, right, for convenience. A couple of attempts at what I assume is supposed to be humor that one or two were okay and I got a little bit of a chuckle out of, but some of it fell sort of flat. But I let it go because a lot of that comic relief is coming from his mechanical mitten, I'll call it. And obviously that's based on a computer program, so it's going to be a little more stilted. Or at least I assume it's based on a computer program and he's not actually talking to someone across the expanse of space and presumably, possibly, time. Let's talk about the artwork for a second. I think it's pretty good. I love the colors and the saturation of the colors. I love that there's just enough detail for things to be detailed without being overblown and overdone. You don't lose the movement or the body shape type of the characters to the background, but the background also isn't bland enough that it goes unnoticed. I think the line work is pretty tight for the most part, and I like the look of the robots, though I will say this, I do feel like the face of Jetfire, who obviously he's based on his Siege iteration, I think his eyes are a little bit too big, maybe his nose is a little bit not quite the right shape. It's obviously Jetfire, but there's a little something there. When we get toward the end and the two main characters remove their masks and look at each other, I don't know if they're supposed to resemble humans or just be kind of human-like. But something is off about the faces to me, especially around the eyes. However, that might be deliberate because we really need to see how they're going to deal with and treat the characters that we know and love and are familiar with, being G.I. Joe, when we're talking about more human faces, right? If they are handled appropriately, and you look at Baroness and you say that's Baroness, you look at Duke and you say that's Duke, and you look at Roadblock and say that's Roadblock, I think it'll be okay, and we'll say, hey, this species or these species look human-like, but not quite. There's just something a little off. So we'll have to wait and see with that. I think the potential, though, is definitely there. We're not overblown and overdone with color. We're not overblown and overdone with line detail. The art is generally pretty tight for what it is. In the end, I think the story is okay. I think the art is okay. I think it's a decent start to this Energon universe with a very simple, straightforward story that leaves a lot of threads to pull on and a lot of unanswered questions at the end, which is probably a good thing. Why do the Zertonians and the Argonians, or whatever they're called, have a conflict? It seems like it's based on a lot of misinformation. Why did the ship crash? Are they in a void? Are they just in regular space? Why is Jetfire here for seemingly millions of years? Where's Cybertron? How is G.I. Joe involved? There's a lot here still, I think, to unfold. Will the enthusiasm of Kirkman and I think Lorenzo, I think they're the ones that's going to be taking the lead on it, will they weave something truly good? Will they be able to tighten up the writing just a little bit, tighten up the art just a little bit? Because the potential is here. You just got a little bit of tweaking that you should do to make it really stand out. Time will tell, but I'll say this. It'll be very interesting to see how fans react to the risks they've taken. Not everyone enjoys Transformers and G.I. Joe crossing over. Some do, some don't. You're going to have to handle it appropriately. And now you have introduced other characters and other species or factions. How will they weave in? And will fans accept them? Time will tell. For now, I think it's an interesting start and maybe lays a nice foundation for what's to come. We'll have to see as the months and years unfold. Let me know what you think about Void Rivals. I appreciate you guys coming by, giving me some of your extremely valuable time. I do know how important it is to you. If you are in a position to help the channel to grow, you can use the donate link. Check us out on Patreon. See what we have to offer to you through spring, or of course, hit that join button and become a channel member. While you are at it, please hit the subscribe button. Stick around, man. Have some fun with us here on the channel. And especially remember that somehow, some way, man, each and every single day, you do make a difference in the world. And I look forward to the next time that you and I get together to have another visit, either in the live streams on Thursday nights at the stop motion premieres or the old-fashioned way right here inside the videos.